Pete Malinverni, Chair of Jazz Studies at Purchase College, and now the co-curator, along with Performing Arts Center Director Seth Soloway, of the Jazz at the Center series. Of course, we're on pause now, as so many things are, but we look forward to mounting some music for you to enjoy live very shortly. But for now, this is a little Valentine, a little thank you to you all for being such generous supporters of Jazz at Purchase through the years, and we hope into the future. Today I'm commencing a little series for you which I call What's Going On Up There, which is basically a look behind the curtain, if you will, at what goes on in a jazz performance. As you know, jazz musicians are called upon to be composers and performers at the same time. And so it's incumbent on us to really have a good handle on all the various elements of music that go into a successful composition, and then to employ those in the moment to make a performance that people will appreciate and enjoy. I'm going to do this series in 5 different installments, one for each of the elements of music as I define it. The first today will be on melody, then we'll do one on rhythm, one on harmony, one on texture, and finally one on form. But today to melody. Here's a melody. Of course, that's the well-known American spiritual Deep River. I always think about melody as being the element of music that affects most the heart. And I never heard of anybody say, oh, I get misty every time I hear that beat, or whenever I hear that chord, I get a little teary-eyed remembering this or that. But melody does that to us. I still get a little choked up every time I hear the Temptations do Just My Imagination. I'm suddenly back in 8th grade suffering my first heartbreak. But what is it that makes melody really? It's just an arrangement of tones, a bag of notes, if you will, put in a certain order. And it sort of revolves around, generally around tonality, in other words, a key center. Something can be in C major or E flat minor, etc., etc. The number I just played happened to be in the key of E flat. So, let's look at the E flat major scale. You've heard it all before, do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, si, do, and back down again. Well, the interesting thing about this, I think, is that each of those notes has a certain hierarchy. Some of the notes within that scale sound more home. For example, that note feels home. That note feels home, the 3rd of the scale. And the 5th of the scale, and then of course the tonic or the 1 up the octave, also feels like 1, or feels like home. The ones that don't feel like home as much are perhaps the 2nd, the 6th, the 4th, and the 6th, and the 7th, right? So each of the notes has a certain thing to it. So if I go, right, kind of frustrating until I hit. So for example, that 7th step of the scale really leans to resolution. Now for nothing, we call that the leading tone of a scale, right? So that feels home, that feels home, that feels home, that feels like it wants to go here. That feels home, that feels home, That feels like it wants to go here, right? That's home, that's home, that's home. Wants to go here. So within the scale are all these requirements, what the next note needs to be, or is it good enough? Are we home? Have we resolved? And the good melodic composer needs to understand that. There's another thing about melody where we can play a melody or compose a melody that is scalar in nature, right? So it's sort of a serpentine, stepwise kind of a thing where you slide in and out of resolution or tension. Then there are the leaps, the arpeggiations, or the wider leaps. I think the scalar kind of stuff is a little bit more cerebral, if you will. It kind of gets into the brain. And the leaps, they're sort of aspirational. That's the way I feel about it. And that song I played for you before, Deep River, more or less stepwise. And then watch this. My home is over Jordan. That leap. My home is over Jordan, right? It really speaks melodically to the lyric, to the mood of the song. And these are the kinds of things we have to understand, and just as one can have a conversation, to have a fulsome conversation with somebody, it helps if we speak the same language relatively fluently. Well, it's the same thing with this. I don't necessarily, when I'm improvising, I don't necessarily think in terms of leap or stepwise, but I have a feeling that I'm trying to express and evoke in the listener, and I will melodically employ those leaps or that stepwise stuff. So I'm going to play for you now Deep River, and I am going to improvise a little section as well in which I'll try to employ some of the things we've talked about. Deep River. Next time we'll talk about rhythm. For today, thanks so much for joining me. Again, my name is Pete Malinverni. I'm Chair of Jazz Studies at Purchase College, and I look forward to seeing you down the road.